Everybody, my name's Ed. I debated back and forth about whether or not I should do a video like this, and I decided to go ahead and do it. I'm gonna try not to make it too long, but at the same time, I think there's lots of issues within this discussion about diversity in comics or whatever that kind of overlap. I just want to say, just straight off the bat, that first of all, I think this discussion is good. I think it's good to have discussions about diversity in comics. I think it's good to have discussions about sex, or is there too much sex in comics? Is there too much violence in comics? Are comics too overpriced? Storytelling methods, too much decompression, have superheroes gone too far into the realm of being anti-heroes? Should we have more religion in comics? Should we have more, conservative values? And should we have more, liberal values, or whatever it is? I think these issues are good. I mean, it speaks to, the content we're getting into our comics. It speaks to how they reflect or don't reflect the larger society or whatever. So I think it's good to have these type of discussions or whatever. And everybody doesn't have to agree or anything like that. That's what having a, freedom of speech in a democratic society is all about. You give your views, and as long as you respect the other person, that's fine. You're free to disagree and say that. You know what I mean? I'm mostly going to be talking about Marvel and DC comics, because that's mostly where all the controversy is about. I mean, we get a comic book like this, nobody cares. Get a comic book like this, no controversy. But we get this, there's a PC agenda. We get this, and somebody's forcing diversity down my throat or whatever. Just for fun, I was going to talk about this comic book because there actually is blatant race swapping going on here, but it's kind of a bad example once I thought about it, because the whole point of this comic book is that the universe changes all the time, and that's part of the changing universe. So it's probably a bad example. But just for fun, this Asian dude here is a Batman analog. This black lady here is Mercy from the Superman cartoon from the 90s. And this black dude here is Lex Luthor. And this blonde lady is Lois Lane. Superman doesn't appear, because that's kind of the mystery, what happened to the Superman analog and so on and so forth. But anyway, getting back to the main conversation. Like I said, these conversations come up all the time. Minorities in comics, representation in comics, la di da di da. The most recent one seems to be kicked off by certain changes that Marvel has done in the last year or so. Most obviously, the Sam Wilson Captain America and the female Thor, or whatever. Seriously, whatever. I'm reading all new Captain America, but come on, it's Captain America. For people who like it, like myself, I'm just going to enjoy the ride while it's going on. It's obviously temporary. Captain America has been replaced several times in the past, and Steve Rogers always comes back. Same thing with Thor. The idea that female Thor is somehow wrecking things or whatever is just absurd to me. They actually turned Thor into a frog at one point. You had Beta Ray Bill Thor. You had Eric Masterson Thor, some biker looking dude Thor. I think the problem is, or the issue, I want to back off from that word saying a problem, but when Bucky takes over for Captain America, sure, there are people who are upset, and they were like, man, I want to read about Steve and so on and so forth, and this is terrible. I hate that they killed Captain America and blah 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 blah. But you didn't get people's using these things about, oh, they're pandering to these groups or they're appeasing somebody. When Dr. Octopus took over Peter Parker's body to be Superior Spider-Man, yeah, Dan Slott got death threats, which I think is a little bit beyond the pale. I mean, it's just a fucking comic book. I mean, seriously, fucking calm the fuck down. But at the same time, people were upset, but you didn't get, oh, you're pandering to middle-aged men. You're pandering to guys that wear glasses that want to have a second adolescent or whatever. You know what I mean? But like I said, Black Captain America, female Thor, they're trying to appease certain groups, or they're trying to make themselves look good or whatever. And I mean, I don't know. I don't really get that reasoning or whatever. You know what I mean? I get people being mad. I get people being upset because seriously, you're reading a comic book and you like the comic book and you like it the way it is. That's the way you like it. I think it's totally legit to be upset when things change. Batgirl. Batgirl recently took a very severe change in direction or whatever, and people, some people were upset about it. They totally liked Batgirl the way it was before, and they're upset that there's this change in direction, and they didn't even change the character. The character hasn't been replaced. The character hasn't been race swapped or anything like that. It's just a change in tone. So I get that, and it's legitimate to say, I liked it the way it was before. You know what I mean? It's legitimate to say, back in the 90s, and somebody please help me out with this, there was some organization. I'm not even sure if it was an organization or it was just some dude who put out an ad, but it was called HEAT, HEAT, and I can't remember what the acronym stood for. But the whole point of it was, at that particular time, Hal Jordan was dead, and the only Green Lantern was Kyle Rayner, and most of the mythos of the most of the mythos of the Green Lantern Corps or whatever weren't being used, and this guy wanted Hal back. That's what he wanted. It was a white guy being replaced by another white guy. So sometimes when people have these objections to things being changed, it's not always based on race or whatever. I mean, sometimes just people legitimately like the thing the way it was before, and that's what they like, and that's fine, and they're upset because now things have changed. I mean, Wonder Woman puts on long pants and some people freak the fuck out. You know what I mean? That's just how it goes. On the other hand, like I said, we have legacy characters, and legacy characters have been around for decades, before I was even born. That's how we even get to having our Wally Wests and our, whomever else characters. And somehow, when legacy characters appear, some people like the older character, but if we have a legacy character and the legacy character ends up being a minority or a woman or something, like I said, people freak the hell out for some reason. You know what I mean? I don't know. And I get it. Now, on one hand, I get it, because I get the idea that some people have is like, well, wait, if you're going to introduce minority characters, why does that character have to be a legacy character? Why, some people have the point of view of, if you have, legacy Iron Man or minority Iron Man or minority Captain America or minority Batman or whatever, that character is automatically diminished because they're either riding on the coattails of the white character or the male character or whatever, or when things go back to normal, what they will when you have A characters or whatever, A-list characters, I should say, that character that minority legacy character or whatever, or that woman minority character or whatever, will then be part of the previous heroes, support staff or support cast or whatever. They don't stand on their own. You need new characters that can stand on their own, and that's fine. I think that's a legitimate argument or a legitimate point of view. My thing is, I don't think you have to choose. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think you can have minority sidekicks, women sidekicks, supporting characters or whatever, and you can also have solo stars and lead characters, whatever. It doesn't have to be a one thing or the other thing. I'm totally fine with the fact that Rhodey is basically, you know, Tony Stark's sidekick or supporting member. You know what I mean? I don't have to choose between that and having Black Panther or something like that. You know what I mean? You can have both. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we kind of need. It doesn't have to be an either or thing. You know what I mean? Um, Now the other thing about that is why don't they create, just create more new characters? And that's a tricky thing because it's not simply just a case of, well, that new characters don't sell. I mean, new characters don't sell, and I think that's Marvel and DC, the way they market things and promote things have kind of like put themselves in kind of a kind of a corner where they actually can't sell new characters or B characters and things like that, just because they've put so much of their effort into event comics and really pushing their A-list characters that are already popular and doing spin-offs and putting title after title after title that stars Batman and putting Wolverine, Spider-Man, Avengers, X-Men, that people who might be inclined to check out a B character or a newer character or a minority character, uh, people are on a budget. People just don't have the money left over, especially when comic books are costing like $3.99, $4.99, $5.99. I mean, it's hard for white male characters to get a foothold in the industry these days, at least when they're talking about the big two. And seriously, I really don't think the big two are anti, new white guys. But like I said, these characters can't catch on because, like I said, they're you're spending $30 just keeping up with your Spider-Man comics and your Spider-Man events and your Forever Evil events. So when DC finally does come out with the new Doom Patrol or the new Black Orchid or whatever the hell, or Marvel comes out with Kazar, it won't sell because, like I said, I've got these 50 Wolverine comics. Now I can't buy this other comic book, and I think that's terrible. But and that affects new characters in general. It affects new minority characters. It affects new female characters. The other thing is going back to Marvel going on TV and advertising. All new Captain America and all new Thor and A Force, whatever. On one hand, I think it's great. I think it's great that they're going on TV and advertising these things. I think it's great if they come out with new Ghost Rider and they have an article in Lowrider magazine. You know what I mean? They should be doing stuff like that. I want to say that they had like some sort of comic book supplement like a few years back in like XXL magazine, which is like a hip hop magazine. It had something to do with like uh, Eminem meets the Punisher or whatever. They should be doing these things. They should be trying to reach out and get people who aren't normally reading comics to let them know that, yeah, comic books are still here. And it's not like it was 50 years ago. You might think it's all Super Friends or whatever, but we got other characters out there. We have other ideas. They should be talking about stuff like that. I'm not a fan of Wonder Woman and Superman being hooked up. I think it's a terrible idea, but people like it, and that's fine. But DC should be going on Good Morning America or wherever the fuck they were at, talking about it. DC just had a thing like not too long, a couple weeks ago, where some 11-year-old girl wrote a letter about, hey, um, I read Justice League, and the only girl in the group is Wonder Woman. How come you don't have more girl characters out there? And DC wrote back to her, and he even sent her a gift basket, I think. and saying, hey, you know what, we have more girl characters coming out, and blah blah blah. And it's like it's a fun little human interest story, but DC should be out there talking about shit like that, you know what I mean? That can only wake people up to the fact that, like I said, there's comics here, and there are different types of superheroes out there for everybody, you know what I mean? When these companies go on, I really don't think it's a case of appeasing certain groups or whatever. I mean, I think they just want people to buy their lousy comics, and that's good. You know what I mean? The comic book market is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and they need to go out there and get the word out. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, you know what I mean. It's not like Al Sharpton is criticizing Marvel Comics. It's not like the National Organization of Women are telling people to boycott Marvel Comics or DC Comics, and now management at Marvel and DC are all scared, and so now that's why we're getting, the Gamora comic or whatever. Seriously, I just think it's a case of them just putting out comics. There's different people out there in the audience. There's different people behind the scenes, which is a whole nother thing. I mean, Marvel and DC probably need to have a little bit more diverse staff as well. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, there are people there. You know what I mean? Sometimes people forget about the fact that there are women working at Marvel and DC. There are minorities working at Marvel and DC too. You know what I mean? um you know so so yeah, I mean, they should be on there. I'm actually really shocked that they have a show like Agent Carter, and I'm sure it has more to do with stuff that I'm probably not privy to, as far as how much money you can spend on this thing to advertise that thing, and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Obviously, of course, Disney owns ABC, and they also own Marvel Comics, but I'm sure it's a thing as far as, I don't know, how much money you want to spend on a product that only sells like 50,000 units. Maybe they think it's not worth it, but I really think they should be saying, go to our website. If you enjoyed Agent Carter, you know, go to Marvel.com and check out, whatever, Captain America, or check out these other female characters, or whatever, whatever, whatever. Um, Speaking of which, you have the new, A-Force comic book, which is going to be kind of female team of Avengers or whatever. The cynical part of me really is like, well, here, that's the other thing I want to get to. The cynical part of me is when I see these things like all new Captain America and female Thor and A-Force. On one hand, I think it's cool that they're out there advertising and trying to let people know that these things exist. The other side of me is like, I don't know. I don't know why they're putting all that effort into advertising things that, and I just feel this way just because I'm an older comic book collector. So I know all of these things are temporary. I know Steve Rogers is coming back. I know Odin's son is coming back. I know it's just a stunt. It's just a temporary thing. Whatever, whatever, whatever. You know what I mean? Why aren't they putting more money and more investment into um, advertising things that might possibly be ongoings, that might last? Sam as Captain America is not going to last, but Storm, which is a comic book that's struggling in sales, does have that potential. Storm's been around for whatever, 35 years or whatever, or shit, what year is this in real life? 40 years, I think. Why not put some investment into advertising this, which potentially could stick around? You know what I mean? Why not go on The View and talk about this comic book, ongoing character or whatever, that's going to stick around, you know what I mean, that they're going to continue to use and stuff. That's what you really need to do. I think that's short-sightedness on Marvel as a corporation, as a, yeah, that's what I want to say, as a corporation, as an entity, going for these, um, the quick fixes, the fast money, the trend of the day. Just let's see here. I'm sure I've got one of these comics. Oh, oh, damn it! It's gonna make a big point. I don't have my funny books around here. Crap. Well, anyway, I know I got some fucking comic book around here that has an advertisement for uh, Guardians team up, and the thing is, there's no way that Marvel actually thinks Guardians team up is going to be around 5 years from now. I mean, basically, the movie is hot, the DVD is coming out, the Blu-ray is coming out, so now they have Guardians team up. I mean, do you really think that the market really wants Guardians team up? I don't know. I'm not even going to put the comic book down or criticize it or anything like that. I like the movie. I like the DNA run and so on and so forth. But it's just obvious Marvel's going for the quick fix, and that's why they do all new Captain America and go advertise that and not advertise Black Panther. That's why they will advertise, like I said, female Thor, but won't advertise Black Widow. And I think that's a shame, and I think that's a mistake. I think they should advertise those things. Like I said, female Thor, but I also think they should advertise Squirrel Girl. You know what I mean? And because that's what's going to keep people reading. That's what's going to keep an ongoing audience. You know what I mean? The idea that there is something here for me, or whatever. You know what I mean? Or that there's different stuff out there. You know what I mean? Um, Other thing I wanted to touch on is this idea that somehow because they do these kind of legacy characters and these race swapping, really race swapping doesn't really happen that much in the actual main universes. You get a little bit of it. You get Wally West, New 52 Wally West. I don't read the Flash, but you get that. You get Nick Fury Jr. or whatever. But usually, if somebody is actually race swapped, a lot of times it's from alternative universes. It's Ultimate Universe. It's Earth 2 or 3 or whatever, DC or whatever. And I mean, it's really this whole they've ruined my character or whatever. It really doesn't happen that much. You're more likely to get it in movies or TV shows, and that's another thing when people go like, "Oh, well, if they changed a minority character to a white character, people would be up in arms." And the thing is, it's kind of happened already. Doesn't happen that much as far as superhero movies and things are concerned, but it has happened. You know what I mean? Only I'm thinking, there was the Generation X movie pilot or TV pilot from Fox TV, where Jubilee, who in the comic books is a Chinese American, was played by a white actress. There's a Spawn movie where the guy, he's just a supporting actor, or it's just a supporting character, but the guy who ended up marrying Spawn's wife, in the comic book, he's a black dude. The movie, he was a white guy. You know what I mean? It happens. And just Google Hollywood race whitewashing or whatever. And the thing is, since there's been a Hollywood, there's been instances where minority characters or ethnic characters have either had their ethnicity downplayed or just flat out changed, to white or whatever. And, cause Hollywood, you know what I mean? So I mean, it happens all the time. A lot of people don't know it, don't think about it, because a lot of times people just aren't familiar with the source material. I mean, it happens in cases where it's based on a true story. Character that was white gets changed to black. Character that was Hispanic is whatever. I mean, is changed to something ambiguous. There's that movie about, well, you know what? I'm not even gonna go through a list, but just Google it. You know what I mean? And that's whatever. That's the world we live in, and so on and so forth. But okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, it seems like these things come up because of Marvel and DC, like I said, and it's really shocking to me that Marvel does something and people either want to condemn them to hell or they want to, praise them to the high heavens. People want to give Marvel a Nobel Prize, or people want to like fucking jump out a window and bomb their offices. Where the thing is, this stuff didn't just start happening like last year or whatever. Not only has Marvel done it before, well, that's another thing. I mean, specifically with the Captain America examples. I mean, Marvel has already had like patriotic minority characters. You had a black Captain America with Isaiah Bradley and Eli Bradley. They also have Miss America Chavez. You know what I mean? And Sam has been like Captain America before, like about 10 years ago. It's just for one story for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 issues or something like that. But I mean, they've done it before. Marvel actually already had a character called Thor Girl. It's not like they were breaking some new ground or whatever. But anyway, getting to the point, DC does stuff too, and it's just really amazing to me that they don't get the same sort of discussion doesn't. Sometimes it comes up and sometimes it doesn't. I'm thinking about the time when they did the New 52. Just off the top of my head, DC had what? Batwing. Wait, they had Batwing, Mr. Terrific, Static, Batwoman, Batgirl, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Voodoo, World's Finest, which was Power Girl, Huntress team up. And yeah, and I remember seeing like 1 or 2 places where people thought, oh, it's interesting. They're switching things up. It's a real mixed bag or whatever. But you didn't have people like flipping their fucking lids about DC is forcing down my throat. Ah! You had a lot of people who were fucking pissed off at DC, but it was mostly because of continuity reasons and things like that. People were mad at DC because, they threw out all their continuity and now they're starting over. Or there was a whole thing where people were like, oh, you know what? These comic books over here are actually pretty good, but these comic books over here suck. You know what I mean? The Superman team doesn't have it together, and they have these other comic books that don't make any sense, and now the continuity is all wonky and it's really stupid and stuff like that. But you didn't have people like freaking the frig out. You know what I mean? Oh, and Batgirl and Batwoman was an actual lesbian. That came out wrong, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, they actually had diversity in their lineup, and it's just weird. I read some article not very long ago, and I thought it was a terrible fucking article, basically based around the whole Black Captain America thing, and talking about how great Marvel was and this, that, and the other thing, and about how DC had a problem with their diversity. And I just thought, the person who wrote this article obviously doesn't read comics, doesn't go to the comic book store, and doesn't read any fucking DC comics, because seriously, DC's lineup at various times has actually been more diverse in an obvious, like, women, minorities, whatever way, and even genre-wise. I mean, they put out more different types of comics between that and their vertical line than Marvel does. Marvel's a very conservative company in that regard, where they're way more likely to give you 5 Wolverine comics than they are to give you a couple of comics about superheroes, and then here's a horror comic, and then here's a crime comic, and here's a fantasy comic, like DC is willing to do. You know what I mean? And again, like I said, Marvel had the first, gay superhero, and then it took them 20 years. It's like they outed him, and then 20 years go by before he actually gets a boyfriend or gets married or anything like that. And I don't know. I don't know. And then he gets married. Then where's he at now? Where's North Star's comic? We could talk about how good or bad the Batwoman comic book was, but it was a comic book about a gay woman who was an actual person who went on dates and did things. You know what I mean? So yeah. Oh, this is what I wanted to bring up. I was really shocked that this comic book doesn't get talked about more, as far as like diversity and whatever. It's created by Jeff Johns, and it's Aquaman and the others, and it was a story about Aquaman's other superhero team besides the Justice League of America, and Jeff Johns created a really interesting multicultural cast. You know, you had people of color. He added older white guys. He added younger white guys and stuff like that. Now, I'll be honest, as an individual reader, I dropped the comic book because it was just kind of blase. It just didn't really grab me. And oh, I wanted to hit, which leads to another thing. Well, actually, let me just finish my statement about that. But here are new characters. Here is a diverse cast, but nobody was talking about it for whatever reason. I don't know. You know what I mean? Um, but that's another thing. But like I said, that's another thing. I don't think, sometimes people say, oh yeah, people want these, diverse casts and these minority heroes and these foreign heroes, and then they don't sell. I don't know, obviously, obviously, I'm African American, and yes, I do want to see, more minorities as stars, more women as stars, more everything. You know what I mean? I think that only benefits people just in general. You know, I mean, just in general. I think that benefits us as consumers. Just wanting a variety of things to read and different characters to hear about and read about and enjoy and stuff. But at the same time, I don't want to be, supporting bad comic books just because they have minority characters in there. Case in point, Deathlock, African American hero, single dad. You know what I mean? And I like that. I think that's an interesting thing to do. But the comic book, it just didn't grab me. I didn't even think it was a bad comic book. But you know what? Fucking comics cost $3.99, and I wanted to be good. I wanted to grab me. You know what I mean? And that comic book didn't grab me. And that actually speaks to a larger thing of buying comic books hoping they'll get better. I'll give a comic book depending on the character or the creators or whatever. Sometimes I'll give them a whole arc. I'll give them that 5 or 6 issues. Sometimes I'll give them 2 or 3 issues or whatever. But that's another way I think, like I said, Marvel and DC are shooting themselves in the foot because, like I said, they come out with all these events and spin off of the exact same character: Batman, Spider-Man. And if you did want to check out Deathlock, you might not have money left over. And like I said, I actually, my personal thing, I think that hurts the industry. So as good as I think it is for Marvel and DC to like advertise, that we have these other characters out here, we have these new heroes and girl heroes and this, that, and the other thing. They shoot themselves in the foot by putting out Infinity Wars and Forever Evils and events that bleed into each other and whatnot. So, and having said that, that's the other thing I'll say about Marvel. Marvel has a tendency of just flooding the market with anything that they think people have the least bit of interest in. So when there's renewed interest in Deadpool, all of a sudden we're getting like 5 or 6 Deadpool comic books every month. The Avengers are big, so now we have like 10 or 12 Avengers comics every month. And a few of them aren't even really Avengers comics. They just have Avengers in the title. I mean, New Avengers isn't really an Avengers comic, it's an Illuminati comic. I mean, Avengers Academy, I don't read that comic book, or not Avengers Academy, Avengers Arena. I mean, isn't it just Hunger Games Battle Royale with superheroes? I mean, is that really an Avengers comic? I don't know. And I hate to say this, I kind of get the feeling that's what's going on with the flood of female characters they're coming out with now. I mean, Ms. Marvel was a surprise hit. It was exactly the type of comic book that nobody thinks would be a success in today's comic book market. You've got a new character, even though she's using an old character's former name. Kamala Khan is basically a new character. We've never seen her before. She has a completely different power set than Carol Danvers. In everything, we never seen her before. New character, has no legacy to either Carol Danvers or the Kree universe or anything like that. I mean, she really could have been called Presto Change-O Girl, and and everything about her origin and everything the way that comic book is being done could have been exactly the same. But anyway, getting to the point, um, you know, comic book nobody thought was going to be a hit. Silly, lighthearted comic book about a teenage Pakistani Muslim girl, brand new character that nobody ever heard about, and it's one of the big hits of the century of the season. I mean, the first issue's gone into like how many printings, like 6 or 7 or whatever, and I think Marvel was like, oh, girl hero, let's flood the market with girl hero comics, and again, I think that hurts some of the comics. I think that's hurt Storm. I think that's hurt a couple of other characters. I mean, I really. Hey, how you doing? Okay, so anyway, yeah, like I was saying, I kind of wonder if Marvel is coming out with A Force because they have a interest in developing further developing their female market, or if it's just um, another Avengers spinoff. You know what I mean? And if so, you know, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Having said all of that, that's my whole cynical take on it. My more optimistic take on it. I'm actually, pretty, excited to hear that there's finally going to be a cyborg miniseries. I'm excited that there's going to be a Vixen cartoon or whatever. You know what I mean? Um, these are characters that are not replacement characters. They're not. You can't write it off as being a stunt. You can't write it off as being somebody's forcing something down your throat or changing something or anything like that. You know what I mean? And I really like to see how well those characters do, and how yeah, I guess that's what I want to say. You know what I mean? It's really interesting that you can have a character like Static be a big hit in a kids show, even though the comic book doesn't do very well. Same thing with Blade. Marvel has no clue or idea whatsoever to do with a Blade comic book, but Blade was able to have a successful movie franchise. I would love it if they would follow suit and do like a Monica Rambeau cartoon or something like that. I do know that in the recent past they actually had optioned a few other things. They have optioned Night Thrasher of all things for a TV show. Brother Voodoo almost got a TV show on Sci-Fi Network, and of course, if you follow comics, you know that there's going to be a Netflix series with Jessica Jones is going to be in one, Luke Cage is going to be in another, and I'm sure those characters will get comic series, once those TV shows and things debut. You know what I mean? So, I'm happy to see that. Like I said, I think as far as like Marvel and DC, I think maybe DC was a little bit more willing to take a few more chances as far as certain characters or in this, that, and the other thing. I think Marvel could be doing the same thing. I think they just have a weird business model where they only want to push stuff that's already popular. La di da di da di da. But I mean, as far as like diversity in comics and stuff like that, I'm obviously not going to come out here and say it's a bad thing or it's terrible or whatever. And I obviously don't think that if, Marvel were to come out with a Luke Cage comic book, somehow it's going to hurt Spider-Man or hurt Peter Parker. I mean, they obviously aren't going to put a moratorium on, publishing, straight white men or whatever. It's a weird thing. It's a weird attitude to take that somehow, for 5 minutes, Marvel or DC puts out a comic book regarding some other characters that it's going to like fucking hurt or change their status quo or whatever. Um, But like I said, I think because of the way the comic book market is, and like I said, business decisions and blah 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 blah, it's a tough it's a tough, what do I want to say, tough road to hoe, I guess. Anyway, those are my views. It's kind of a long video. I really don't do videos that take this much time. So if you stuck it out with me, thanks, and let me know what you think. And everybody have a good day.